4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, welcome aboard. Before we get to Daniel Henninger and his great column, Obama to the World, Drop Dead, U.S. voters who have been polled by Gallup on their three-day rolling average poll might be saying something along those lines, not literally, figuratively speaking, politically speaking, to President Obama. His approval rating as of today is 39%. 39%. Just thought we would bring you that. And as you know, the breaking news also that Israel's cabinet has unanimously rejected John Kerry's latest ceasefire proposal, which would give a one-week humanitarian halt in hostilities. And Israel, now understand this, in the Israeli cabinet, you don't have all right-wing folks. You have left-wing folks too. And for the cabinet to unanimously reject the ceasefire, that is telling. And what we're hearing is that they came out and said, or the vote centered around the fact that they would not reward Hamas for what they have done, for the terror they have put forth, and for what they have created here, firing the rockets into Israel, forcing Israel to do what they have done. You don't reward Hamas, as the ceasefire called for. The ceasefire has a lot of provisions in it, 2 stages addressing the underlying issues, which means concerns of Hamas. You're going to reward Hamas, show them and show terrorists that they could just lob missiles into Israel, and then Israel will say, okay, let's talk. What are your problems? You can't do that. And Israel, luckily, I say luckily for them, not for me, in my view, has said we will not acquiesce. We will not go along with this ceasefire. So we'll see where that leads. Okay, folks, before we get to Daniel Henninger, and I have to excuse my throat because it's not too good, let's watch this Barack Obama clip.
We've reduced our carbon pollution over the past 8 years more than any country on earth. You saw an LA Times headline the other day that said 2014 off to the hottest start on record for California. That's why we have to worry about climate change. We've tripled the electricity we're getting from wind power, generating enough last year to power every home in California.
Quite a job, in case you didn't know it, folks. And joining us now is Daniel Henninger, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter and deputy editorial page director of the Wall Street Journal. Hello, Daniel.
Hi there, Steve.
Didn't you know things were just hunky-dory and rosy as could be?
Well, yeah, unless you are obsessed with the fact that we're having a hot summer in Los Angeles, as the president seems to be. But that clip, man, that's what this guy really, really cares about. I mean, the world may be in flames in Ukraine, the Middle East, and so forth, but all he wants to think about and talk about is global warming and energy and education.
Minimum wage,
income inequality. You know, as I wrote this week.
Yeah, and by the way, your column, the great column, Obama to World, Drop Dead. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what that means is that he's not interested in what's going on outside the United States. I think he's the most purely political president that we have had in this century, and that includes Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was really a highly political guy. But the difference is that at least Johnson would turn his attention from time to time to the public interest. And with Obama, it's just all politics all the time. And what he's been doing on these fundraising trips, when he claims to be able to run the affairs of the world out of his back pocket, is simply try to collect money so that he can go out and commit acts that cause his coalition of the ascendant, his political base, to get out there and vote in November. It's as I say, it's just a presidency that can think in only one single note, and that is electoral politics. And that's, I think, pretty much because that's all he has ever known.
Yeah, and it, you know, about a week or 2 or 3 ago, I started saying it before the plane was shot down, before the ground war, and even the war with Hamas and Israel. It was just total disinterest. You and I might have even spoken about it last time you were on. I mean, I never saw a president who just seemed so totally bothered to be where he is, having to do what he was doing, just didn't want to be there. And then they're suing me, they're picking on me, they didn't do it to Bush, maybe I'm different, implying racism. Just didn't want to be president anymore, couldn't care less about anything. But now, as before, but now to a greater extent, there's real darn problems here. And there's no change in the demeanor. There's no change in who he appears to be.
Well, yeah, exactly. And he keeps coming up with more and more preposterous excuses and reasons not to involve his office in any of the events of the world. The thing that really, really jumped out at me, Steve, was this event Monday that hardly anybody watched. But Obama went out on the White House lawn, spoke for about 10 minutes about both Gaza and the shoot-down of Flight 17. Gaza, I think, got about 2.5 minutes. And then he turns to Ukraine and Putin. And he says that Mr. Putin has to take responsibility for the shoot-down of this plane, that the Ukrainian separatists are beginning to threaten, he said, not only Ukrainians, but what he called the broader international community, unquote. I guess that was the people on the plane. Then he goes, and if this continues, Mr. Putin must understand that there is going to be a high price to be paid for it. And you go, what is he if this continues, you mean like more planes being shot out of the sky? Well, of course, Putin understood that what Obama was doing was the same thing he did in Syria. Remember the red line?
Right, which he later said he never drew. It was the international community that drew it.
Yes, exactly. And, so that's what he just did Monday with Putin. Putin followed that by, as has been reported here in the last day or so, with live artillery firing from Russia into eastern Ukraine. So much for the red line. It's a very kind of frightening situation, Steve.
I mean, Putin is delivering more sophisticated weaponry to the rebels as we speak. It's as if he's testing this president of ours, and there's absolutely no response. There's silence on the other side. It's as if Putin could do almost anything he wants to do.
Well, he's done testing him, and he's just going to act. Putin's got strategic interest there. He wants to pull Ukraine back from the West, and he's going to intimidate them until the Ukrainians agree to essentially become part of the new Russian-led eastward-leaning coalition, which would be a defeat for the West. And people go around asking, Steve, does this sound like 1938? Does this sound like 1914? If you go back and look at the history of the pre-war periods, and the resonances are getting stronger and stronger. They really are. I mean, the Italians invaded Ethiopia before World War II, and Neville Chamberlain went to Munich in 1938 and conceded Czechoslovakia to Hitler. And people forget that when Chamberlain went back to England after this notorious event, the streets were lined with people cheering, and Chamberlain's Munich decision was very popular. And what that means is, it is true. Populations we're not suggesting that we need to go to war with Russia, but people do not want to engage in dangerous situations like this. And that's why you become president of the United States. That's your job to understand these things, not to hide from them.
All right, now we have the situation, of course, with Israel. The Israeli cabinet saying today they do not accept this ceasefire. I'm glad they don't. I mean,
I am too.
I mean, you put on CNN or any of these networks, and all they say is, "Oh, we have to have a ceasefire. Oh, let's hope. Oh, it looks good. Oh, it's so needed." And I'm like, "Yeah, you want to give Hamas time to regroup, rearm, and rededicate themselves?" Anyway, so they turned it down. And Israel's going to be the heavy here, not only in the media, but within our own administration. I am sure of that. And I keep hearing from Kerry about the underlying issues. Just have the ceasefire. Please, Hamas, please have a ceasefire. Then we'll talk about your concerns. And I'm sitting there from day one when he said this, actually on Chris Wallace's show when he was caught on the open mic and then was explaining himself. What concerns of Hamas exactly are we going to address as part of a ceasefire?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the U.S. position comes down to the same old thing that you hear from the left under these circumstances, quote unquote, stop the killing. And that's their idea of a foreign policy, with no consideration whatsoever to, Israel's strategic interest or even vital security interest. We've all talked to friends living over there who have been living over there under these Hamas rocket attacks. And, for Israelis, it's kind of akin to the London Blitz. You're working, suddenly all the sirens go off, and they know the rockets are incoming, and you just hope it doesn't hit where you're working or where you're living. And the extent to which this gets suppressed while we have to bleed for Hamas is it's beyond moral equivalence, Steve. It's kind of a moral collapse on the part of the quote unquote world community.
And one other piece here. Yesterday I had Bill Richardson on, of all people, who said that he wishes the United Nations human rights people would leave Israel alone and go after the persecution of Christians. He also said our State Department needs to do more of that on the persecution of Christians. I mean, it's more than persecution. It's genocide in Iraq at this point, Mosul and other places.
Yeah.
And here again, you have a Christian in the White House who hasn't said boo about it, and it's been going on for years in all parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, to be crudely political about it, Barack Obama is a man of the left. The progressive left in the United States. And they do not want the United States to be engaged or committed anywhere in the world, because that, in their mind, elevates and legitimizes the idea of spending federal money on national security or defense. They've been trying very hard to reduce the defense budget, been trying that for about 30 years. And they want Barack Obama to cut that defense spending and reprogram it into domestic spending, subsidies for Obamacare, and stuff like that. And so he just is not going to put his foot anywhere in the world that would cause the United States to feel that we ought to increase our spending on national security, which obviously we should.
I agree, but I'll tell you one thing. He'd be speaking about it day in and day out if it were Christians, forcing Muslims to convert at the threat of a sword. We'd be hearing about it in the media. We'd be hearing about it from this administration non-stop. At least that's what I think. Anyway, Daniel, always great to talk to you. An honor for me to have you on the show. Thank you, sir.
Great to talk to you, Steve.
Take care. Daniel Henninger, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming back with the Malzberg panel, so don't you go away.